So this is my 100th episode.
No, it's not. It has to be your 99th.
Why?
Because your 100th one has to be your son interviewing you.
Well, that's a good idea. So this is my 99th episode, okay? So if you've been paying attention, this is episode 99, not 100. So I'm swapping that around. This is recording, yes. Okay. So, and this is my mum. Okay? So this is what we're doing. Now, I normally start off with some sort of boyish introduction of all the wonderful things that you've done, and then come to some dramatic crescendo and saying, Andrea Morton, thank you very much for joining me. But it's my mum, so I would feel a bit daft doing that. So you'll excuse me and bear with me if I'm not doing that, all right?
This is fits that, because the most wondrous thing I've done is perfectly you.
Oh, shucks. Thank you very much. I'll take that all day long.
All day long.
Would you introduce yourself to both of my listeners?
That'd be your aunties.
Well, there's one auntie and there's some guy that has seen tales in like 26 different countries, so I'm not doing too badly. There we are.
My name's Andrea Morton. I am a retired head teacher. Nearly 20 years retired.
20 years retired. Jeez, I remember going to a retirement party.
I remember you going to a retirement party as well.
I came by helicopter. Not quite to you, but it's well, I did. I was in Nice. I was in Monaco, and I got a taxi. It was actually the airport taxi, but it was a helicopter because somebody else was paying for it. Obviously didn't know that at the time. So a helicopter to go and see my father retire from Monaco to Nice and then flew home to Brussels. Oh, because I tried to years entirely.
20 years come June.
Wow.
And you go.
My goodness me.
I know. Spaced up.
When did you, you started work aged what?
21.
21, straight out of college, teacher training college. Yeah. And that was just as a plain ordinary teacher.
You don't get plain ordinary teachers. All teachers are special.
Of course not. All teachers are special.
Yes, I did. And I taught for 9 years in a variety of mixed ability schools, shall we say. Some were a bit more, dangerous than others. In fact, dangerous. I actually got danger money. £100 a year extra for going to a second school because it was so dangerous and they couldn't get staff.
So inner city Glasgow?
Yes. It's got a school near a pub called the Surrey Heat, the Saracen's Head, and then you weren't allowed to walk from the bus stop to the school unescorted.
Right.
And they put petrol bomb through the office window to destroy the police files.
Nice.
Yes. So yes.
As an introduction to welcome to your worthwhile profession.
I learned more that year than I ever learned, I think.
So 9 years in, then what happened?
I got a headship in a little village called Bridgeport in Ayrshire.
What was this? What was your story behind that before that? But what were you going to do?
Oh, I know. I was going to be a head teacher before I was 40. Mm-hmm. That was my ambition. But I made it before I was 30, so that was fine. I tried to get a deputy head's job, assistant head's job at the time. And when I was being interviewed for a job that I didn't get, I was told there that I could apply straight for the head job. So I did in Argyll. I got it. So that was basically I was being told at the interview to apply for the next job. And I did, and I got it.
I said the good old days when there was a vast shortage of teachers.
Yes.
Especially in a school where there were
8 children.
Right.
Yeah. One of them was you. Yes.
Well, not quite. I was starting school.
You started in primary one. Yes.
Primary one, aged
5.
Age 5. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you were my head teacher.
Yes. And you would come home and say you didn't have any homework, and I'd set it to you. But then you know I did because you'd done it. So just 3.5 pounds. Yes.
So that was your first...
That was my first headship.
So you did the executive role?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's different because you weren't just teaching. You weren't just an individual person teaching. You actually had the responsibility. It's a different level of responsibility.
Yeah, I had all the paperwork and everything else to do, and the ordering and your requisitioning and everything, basically everything. And so that was the odd day I cleaned the school, and when the cleaner didn't come, I drew the line of when the cook was off sick. We went down to the hospital ourselves. So that's it. snide remarks.
Exactly.
You survived my cookie.
I survived very well.
Oh,
On it, very polite.
yeah, it's got worse. When we go down to the local jail, if the cook was off, but if the cleaner was off, I just did it. So that's
Get the vacuum there.
yeah.
So you stepped from 9 years as a teacher in interesting circumstances. This was the ordeal by fire, quite literally.
Yeah.
Right? Frisbee people for miles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was common.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Then, as your first executive, probably first role of responsibility was a small school.
Very good learning experience. Yeah.
And how long were you there?
There for 3 years, just over 3 years, 3 years and a couple of months. And then I moved to bigger school, which had 3 teachers and myself. But again, they still had no, to start with, they had no office staff. So I was still doing, all the office work, all the administration from the office and answering the phone, as well as teaching a class. That was a composite 5-6 class.
And how old were those kids?
Well, they were 9 and 10. 9 and 10. You were one of them. Because you were in that stage. That, and I'm not sure I wanted to inflict you on anybody else. But, that was only good, but a wee brace back. So that was interesting. And I remember saying to a fellow colleague who had gone to a non-teaching post from the same sort of situation. I said, I don't know how you can do it and not teach. And after a year in that situation, I said, I need to be non-teaching because I really couldn't do both jobs properly.
So you were doing both jobs okay, but...
Yeah, I could have done more. I eventually got 2 hours a week office staff, which was a big difference. And once I realised how much I'd been doing that wasn't really my skill set, then it was easier. Once I got some office stuff, then it was easier to see the potential.
Was that the first time you discovered delegation?
Yes, with a vengeance.
And how did it work?
Very well, thank you. I'm very good at it. I discovered I could do
A
this.
genetic skill. It's a thing.
It's not. Since I did a delegation at the time, I just wanted people to help and persuaded them they could. And I actually got quite a lot of the community involved. So that was an interesting development.
So you're at this point, you've gone from being the responsible and the teacher for all of them, because of course the 8-person school, the kids were aged 5 to 12.
Yeah.
So you had every class in one room. That was interesting. But then went from that to a small-ish school, 3 elementary staff, and you got somebody in to help. Doing some admin stuff. So did that mean that you were doing less teaching at that point?
Yes, I had some time off. I had the 2 hours that she was in to do the, so I had that off.
What did you do with those 2 hours?
Probably drew breath. Actually probably did more planning. You could sort of get a chance to literally to draw breath and to plan activities for the whole school, because you had to monitor everyone. That was when I first had the aspect of having to check up on other folk. And that was different as well. That's a different take on it. Because you're doing it yourself, you can do it. If you don't do it, then you have to go back and do it. But when somebody else doesn't do it, and you have to go in and say, excuse me, but that's not happening. You need to do X, Y, and Z. That was a novel experience because I'd had no training in that at all. Nobody
ever does. This is what I'm all about, is that nobody ever gets this moment in time where somebody says, by the way, congratulations, here's your new job. There's your team. Good luck. And it's never followed up with, and here's your team. Good luck. And this is the first 3 things you need to know about how you actually deal with people.
Right. That would have been helpful. That would have been helpful because I had a dyed-in-the-wool teacher who did exactly the same thing every year. And I found that out when she left, and her workbooks, her planners were there, and the one for 20 years before that was exactly the one she was using. And regardless of the children and progress needing anything else.
Just sort of crossed out feet and inches and put it in centimetres.
She wrote the whole thing out again.
Right.
Exactly the same, and all that was changed was the dates.
Nice.
Yes.
It's efficient.
No.
So when you first started then taking on the responsibility, you went from the responsibility of the role to the responsibility of having a team. Now, there's a difference between being in charge of some individuals and being in charge of a team. But, and I know your latter years, you're very, very good at building teams. Doesn't sound like that was a team.
No, that was not a team. Once a certain member of staff left.
That's speed.
Yes. Actually didn't come in one day, was never seen again.
There you go.
That's, yeah.
No head, the backside, no way out.
Nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. Once that had been sorted, there was, the start of one. There was a start of one because, unbeknown to me, it had been aggravating the other members and stuff. So, yes, so that was a start. And by the time I left, there was the start of a team. They felt more united. They did feel more united.
It's not an uncommon thing that I see a lot, I'm sure people notice, is you have high performers or even just averagely decent people and somebody's pulling them down and you're sitting there going, when is the boss going to fire that person? Or when is somebody going to deal with that person? Very hard in public sector because it's very hard to do it. But it's hard enough in private sector where you've got a boss who just doesn't know how to set performance standards, how to hold people accountable, or ultimately how to fire someone. As well, I don't know, but and my one learning, which we'll get to yours in a second, my one learning is the minute you know that something has to be done, has to do it. The minute you know that there's a performance issue or there's a challenge or there's a problem, you've got to deal with it. It will never improve on its own. You can never give that second chance. You can never, nothing's going to change. You've got to deal with it. Just that's it. In your situation, of course, you're kind of hamstrung.
Yeah.
Because you can't fire teachers. It's not how it works. So she magically left of her own accord, which is a story for you, a little bit, right? You then got a chance to build this into a team. How did you do that?
That one I didn't really do a lot of because by that time I was kind of halfway through, I'm missing my turn, but I was
saying you're in the 10.
Yeah, well, I'd intended to be there longer, but things have happened, and I was only there for about 2.5 years, so it wasn't long enough. By the time I had dealt with that, a year wasn't enough time to build an efficient team. But we did it basically with extracurricular things. So that
what does that mean to people who don't know schools?
We had a choir, and we went out singing. Basically, we got the kids to do that and to be more involved in the community. And because the teachers were all local, the church, yeah, that was basically how we did that one.
So you hooked into things that were outside of the day-to-day.
Yes, there was no competition between them.
Right,
where they could all excel.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Where you're allowing people to be good, to feel good about themselves.
Yeah, and together.
Collective.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, interesting. Okay, so that's where you had in the small-ish team first cut your teeth on dealing with difficult kids, the fire bombs. Okay, challenging individuals. Then starting to build a team. Where did you go from there?
I went to a much bigger school where I had, instead of having 3 teachers, I had 12. And I also had ancillary staff, and I had office staff, plural, which was absolutely amazing. And God bless them. They loved it. They made my life so much easier. And probably that was where I realised the importance of involving everyone, especially the janitor and the drivers, because they can make life hell on earth, or they can make it run smoothly.
Smoothly.
Yes. Because the backup from the janitorial staff and the office staff, that's all your admin, that's all your organisation, that's your outside behaviour, basic manners in children, looking out for other people, being responsible for doing things because other people are involved that they wouldn't have thought otherwise.
I remember the journeys were wonderful.
Yes.
Absolutely wonderful human beings. It's fixing, but that was...
including George. Yeah. They were, very well blessed with that. So that was it. I think the other thing was that the school had been a primary department of a secondary school.
Brian.
And I was actually the first head teacher of the school when it became a separate entity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started, the school didn't even have its own telephone. It had an extension. And the staff were absolutely over the moon when we got our own telephone and they became independent.
There's one.
Absolutely ludicrous. That
So that's
so much easier on everyone, especially the officer. But yes, but it did.
Let's go into the idea. You came in, you waltzed in the door one day and says, "Oh, I'm the new boss."
And apparently they tell me, or people have told me that when I was talking about the independence of the school, I on the table. I don't remember that.
The table banger.
You will do this. You will do this. So we will. And they liked that. They liked the we as opposed to.
On the practicality of that, I remember we moved house.
Yeah.
Okay. And 1st of September or something like that, I assume it was a start with 1st of October was the Travis school year. So.
No, it wasn't. It was a second term. Yeah. But no, that was an April one. We moved in the April because you were still primary 6.
Oh, right. We moved to 6-7, but I had 1 year in that school. Yeah, right, 1 year. So you walk in the door, how much notice did you get on this?
Roughly 2 months. 2 months, yeah.
2 months to move house. But did you find out anything about the school before you went in?
Oh, yes. I found out a lot about the school. Actually, it was the education officers. I'm not going to go into detail about that.
That was 40 years ago. You're fine.
Yeah.
They're all dead. Right. So you took on the responsibility for the school, the responsibility for the staff, the responsibility for 300 kids.
Yeah, 300 back.
332 resources.
No, it wasn't. It was 260. That one was 260. Because if you got 261, you got an assistant head.
So close.
Yeah.
So
it's all right, the large.
But you're like, that's that. Fine. So when you took the team on, when you went in first, had you a manifesto in mind? Had you a plan in mind? How did you build that?
I didn't. I honestly didn't have one in mind at that point. And everything that went on round about, the job was, we moved because we had to move from, geographically we had to move. So we had moved and, I can't say I hit it running. They didn't. But the staff were all willing. No, that's not true. And mine was either they were all able. There was a right mixed bag of folk, but there were decent folk. The staff were nice. It was a lovely area. Children were just children. But with, I don't know how we did that one. We didn't have the external thing to keep us together. I started with the staff and the social thing because the staff room was awful. And we started literally there with a cup of tea. And the seats were uncomfortable. And we started there. I said, what would you like to make this more comfortable? We said, it's second-hand stuff. It's this, that. What would you like? And but you're asking us what we want. And I'm saying, well, yes, you're in it more often than I am. What would you like? So they thought about it and they came back with a list and I did fundraisers and, one teacher actually said, don't put anything down or she'll raffle it. And that was kind of true because I got the money and we did it and we did it ourselves. We didn't bother with the education authorities. Yeah, I did that for other things, but we did it. And they knew that if they wanted anything for their classes, we would get it. Fair. I even sold the furniture. There was I don't know if you remember it, but in the hall, the central hall, because it had been a secondary thing, there was this glass cabinet, which must have been about 20 feet long.
It was like the awards cabinet.
Yes. And it was cupboards at the bottom and glass cup and things in the bottom. And I sold it to the auctioneer and we got a new reading scheme out of it.
Florida Hollis. Well, would you need that for the school?
Well, this is it. So I think that was what it was when they realised
you're on their side.
They could actually get things, that they then could do.
So you put them in the position of
you decide.
You're in charge of this bit, not this bit. When it came to the overall direction of the school, you come into that, it'd probably been part of another organisation for a long time. You basically pulled it out, which to my many listeners is basically like some sort of demerger, right? That's what you did.
Yeah.
You went in there and took it over, separated this out, carved it out from this entity, and you had to create its own identity.
Yeah. We got the kids to do that. They designed their uniform. They had to, they made their own, a new uniform. And we got two parents on board with that too. So we asked them what kind of clothes they wanted, and then we let the kids design it for basic, simple, as a sweatshirt. But we did quite high.
Which was very early, because that was all, I mean, this was avant-garde, right? It was blazers and ties and shirts and all that sort of stuff at this point. And if you're listening from the States, most kids in the UK wear uniforms, right? And as a parent of children, saints be praised, you have one set of clothes you need to worry about. Because most of Europe, most of the US, they just wear their own clothes, which means that every kid has to have something to wear, and everybody's going, oh, that's not the latest, whatever. But going for a blazer, it's cheap, it's recyclable, and
it hangs in the floor of the cloakroom.
It sits in the floor of the cloakroom all day long.
Yeah.
Or you got a blazer, a £20 blazer, a £20 jumper, or a £70 blazer sitting on the floor.
No, we went for the specials. She dealing with the colour ties. So we've got that lot. We've got what that is. And then we started with the local communities. In those days, you had to go to the television room if you wanted to watch the programme.
And you didn't have one on the wheel you could trolley around.
Yeah, but we had an up and down. It was a bit up. So I got the local shops, people again, sort of not quite raffles, but said that we would have the education department, so listen to this.
They're all good. So it speaks to your professionalism, but still you're not naming names. There's some good stories here somewhere, I tell you.
We had a local TV guy in, and he got a television in every single classroom. So obviously we need to spend hours wandering from one thing to the other. And then he set it all up with the videos. So in a wet interval, we could stick in cartoons. The kids could watch those cartoons. We got people involved in new things. We get the local horticultural people to come in and do planting with the kids so that they can do balls and things like this, So we did a lot of, people coming to us as well as us going out and things. So, yeah.
So you're doing two things here. One is you're building the identity of the school itself, but doing it as you had to because it's a school full of kids who have parents who have lives outside. Their education was the product that you were providing, and you did that in the context of the community around you. At the same time, building both together.
Yeah, but we had a really.
Was that conscious, or just serendipitous?
Maybe a bit of both.
That's not
once we said, well, we could do this, and we can do that, we can do this. And it kind of built up that way. And we were the biggest school in the area, and there was lots of small single teacher schools round about, and we became the focus. We then became the focus. And if anybody wanted anything, they would come and borrow it from us. We were kind of like a lending library. And we had a visitor from BBC. Then he came in, and some swaps were going on round about him, and he was kind of watching and saying, "Did you do this?" I said, "Well, yeah, we do this, and we'll do this for that, and do that for that." And he said, "Yeah." So he said, "Would you like to try the primary, BBC thing with the education programme?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, well, you're doing this. And I said, yeah, but he said, but do you use BBC programs? I said, yes, more of rubbish. And okay, and yeah, so we got involved in that for a while, and then it was 2 technical reasons. We did a lot of other bits and pieces. Some staff left, some retired, some and other ones joined us, and the ones that joined us were, able to fit in, shall we say, able to fit in with what we were doing. But that was kind of when we started doing trips abroad and stuff like that as well. So that was, we did.
Well, back to the staff here. Now maybe we should actually move on, because I think it's more interesting, because this is you as well, gaining experience in working with people, working with communities, working with the kind of bigger schools. So you were at that school for how long?
All over at that school.
Yeah.
8 years.
8 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you mean typically, I call that tour of duty. Any job is a tour of duty. So you're 1 year to learn how to travel slot.
6 years.
1 year to good at it. 1 year to master it, and 1 year to get ready for the next time. So you go there for 8. So you got
maybe it was 6.
And then had this extended period of excellence, because it was an excellent school.
Mm-hmm.
Then you moved up to what?
Yeah.
Well done.
I had the school. I had
plumbing.
Yeah, basically, it was running well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons I got involved in things like the BBC and stuff like that was because I'd got it running well and have an awful lot of list. Not so much to, but keep my interest.
Be yourself at a door.
No, you can never be that. No.
Isn't that the goal? Do you want to help people?
No, I want to watch people doing it.
Yeah. That's the thing. You want.
You want to be in a position where you can see. You don't out of the job because you're just keeping the eye. I'm not actually allowed to scrub the toilets. That's we've done from that one, but still had to do it on occasion. So, what I can remember vividly, because there was 3 of us sitting having dinner one night, 3 colleagues, and somebody said, "You need to move to such and such." And I said, "Where? Why? When? Where? Why?" And they said, "It's in dire straits." And I said, "Well, why should I move there?" And they said, "Because you would love it." And I thought, and then went home and thought about it, I may as well try it. It's feasible, it's travel, you could travel that. And I did. And then I went to see it. It had its own living glazier, because the place that, windows get smashed every night. It was due for not demolition, but rebuild. It was either going to be upgraded or rebuilt. And fortunately it was rebuilt. So I went there before it was rebuilt. So I had enough time to get to know the staff. It was a U-shaped building, which meant you were forever on the trot going, right, because it was a fair size one. That one had the 330 kids. Sometimes more of them, and they rebuilt it as an open plan school, totally open plan.
330 little squeaky voices, and how many staff was that?
We had 10. I had 10 I actually had 12 teachers. I had 4 auxiliaries. I had 2 office staff, a janitor. I had 6 cleaners and 8 in the dining hall. Yeah. And a lot of cooking.
And a lot on the team.
Yeah.
That
was a shock to the system. So while we were still in the old school, I introduced team teaching. And so the kids actually had 2 teachers working with one larger group of children. And sometimes we had to put them in the hall because that was the only space that we could accommodate them. And we spent a lot of time with the children learning learning how to change their shoes. Because the new school was going to be carpeted, and I had to change their shoes. And that was a challenge for some of them.
Can you do the laces?
We actually suggested that the parents done gyms.
It's the one plumpkins,
pencils,
sandings,
gutties.
It comes from gutta percha, which I'm sure you knew that.
No.
Gutter petrol is gutter petrol rubber.
All right. Okay.
That's where gutties come from.
Well, there you go.
No, and random self. Back out. No,
So with it, with that, yeah, I remember it was a nightmare because in that school it was a 2-stream school, so that meant that there was two primary 7s, 2 primary 6s, 2 primary 5s, and the 2 primary 5s weren't even doing the same reading scheme. Flat places on the same books, and there was no consistency with anything in there. The senior teacher was responsible for music, and she was actually a brilliant music teacher, but her responsibilities meant that she had the key to the music cupboard. That was all she did. So she was an element when I said, I'm sorry, but hey, you can do music, you're doing music. And yes, she did music after that. Everybody benefited from that. And we did a lot of, with the team teaching aspect of things, we said, right, you prefer to do PE rather than art, and you prefer to do art rather than PE. Guess who's working together? Yeah, we did that. So we played to the strengths of the staff. And yeah, we got them to, what I did was, I said to them, what would you like to remain the same? What do you like about the school? We did a survey, and we did it with everybody. We did it with the kids, we did it with parents, we did it with cleaners. Everybody did this survey, and they had to write down 6 things. 3 they liked and wanted to remain the same, and 3 they didn't like and wanted to change. And we worked from there.
That's a good place to start.
Well,
you did have some data points.
Yes. Yeah, you call me.
Exactly.
We knew what they wanted and what they didn't want. We knew what they liked about the school, what they didn't like about the school. And it was surprising how coherent these lists were.
Mm-hmm. Was it?
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, it worked. My first parent meeting at that school, it was with the school board who were representative on the interview panel. They were actually representing.
And the interview, your panel, the interview.
The one that I was interviewed for. The first meeting that I went to as the head teacher debated the legitimacy of the interview.
Nice, good start.
Yes. There were 20 people. No, the school board should have consisted of 6. There were 20 people at that meeting complaining about the fact that I got the job.
Good stuff.
That was my start in that one.
Nice.
Yeah. So I called in the big guns after that and said, oh, sorry, but you come in and sort this out first of all, and then have people. So
just the parallels between everything they're talking about here. Now you were doing this 20 years ago, 35 years ago, and dealing with boards, dealing with the equivalent of a dysfunctional board, a dysfunctional organisation, trying to get your constituency on side, understanding what they wanted, and I've got that in a second, and dealing with this board is dysfunctional. I am not going to work with them. You have to fix it. You go to whoever it is who wins the board, because everybody's got a boss. Everybody always has a boss. Even the boss always has a boss. You can find something with somebody. That's the parallel are just phenomenal between what you were doing and what I see on a daily basis. Absolutely. Even with team teaching, you find it's not a thing for commercial, but you're trying to do something valuable that strengthens your organisation, playing on the strengths of the individuals you have at hand, to deliver something of higher value to the people you're supposed to be delivering them to. You're playing for the strengths, you're identifying the challenges, the positives, what went well, how to even better it, all that sort of stuff. And the consistency there is absolutely predictable. You do that in any organisation and you will pick up, everybody's talking about this is the problem. That's what we have to fix first. Everybody says that this is good. That's the third rail we don't touch. We don't go there yet.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think it's quite interesting. This is where I want to go back to. Is when you start to talk to your team who's trying to deliver this, and you talk to them and you ask them questions like, what do we do? Who do we serve? How do we do that? What are we for? What are we against? And if you get, typically in a dysfunctional organisation, you get very inconsistent answers to that. Who do we serve? Oh, the school board. Who do we serve? Oh, the kids. Who do we serve? Oh, the parents. Who do we serve? Oh, the Janny. If you get all these different answers, then you know, oh, okay, I got some work to do here. That's in prison. When you took over at the one-person school where you were there, you were taking over, there was nobody there. You walked in, there was a cleaner. Occasionally. So you had to invent that from scratch. You had nothing to go on.
Yeah.
Kids turned up Monday morning and was like, hello, miss. I said, hello, I'm your new teacher. And 9 years in, you knew when you had to teach. Had just discovered that you were there at the keys to the school and had to make sure everything else was running. Discovering jotters from 1926.
Yes.
Reading schemes from the 1850s.
Brass protractor.
Brass.
Introduction to the King's English.
Magnificent. What? Perfectly timed.
Yeah.
You should have just get it and Harley just right into Dublin.
Swapped it for that. I swapped it for duplication.
A band
of it.
The days before photocopiers.
Yes.
Right. So you went into that raw. You went into the next school with some insights from the management, the executive who gave you that and had to take on this school. You went into the third one again, trying to build this team up by going to the staff themselves and saying, well, do you want a better kettle on the dartboard, or what is actually going to make a difference for you, starting with this team? When you went to this one last school we were looking at, where did you start? Where did you start? Because you go in, and people go through this all the time. An exec walks into a new business that they have to run. They have to take it forward. They're it. How?
That one was hard. Just saying it, but I had got the job, and the deputy head hadn't, and the deputy head was still there, and the deputy head had.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, the deputy head has her clique.
Mm-hmm. That also happens all the time.
Yeah,
people are people,
but they were in the minority, and the majority of the staff had been isolated from this clique.
Oh, okay.
So I was in a winner because they wanted change. The clique, fortunately, 2 of them retired. 1 moved, and 1 stayed until she retired quite a few years later, and was a thorn in the side right the way through. Did some instigating with parents at schoolgate, that sort of stuff, but counteracted it. We, there's nothing that could be done. We just had to pull it. But the rest of the staff were delighted because they could then work, and yeah, they were excited about getting to new premises. It was a time scale for that, so it was a time scale of so they knew within the next year they were going to be new premises, and they knew there would be a lot of work to be done to do that, and they were willing to do it. It was a lot harder. It really.
What did you do first?
The first thing I did was I actually went in the Easter holidays and took photographs and sent them to delivered them. I went and had an appointment with the Director of Education and said I wanted to show my holiday stamps. And at that point I could see him thinking I've appointed the wrong person. And I showed him the holiday stamps. And they consisted of the corridor windows being tied together with string, a padlock on the emergency exit.
Oh, nice. The children's school. Classy. One assumes they took it off during the day. Or was the padlock just holding the door shut?
The door, the windows, 50% at any one time of the windows were boarded up. So these were the kind of photographs I was showing him. And he fixed the apoplexy, and I thought that's it. So that was one version on my side. So they used to play. The tour rags, the local tour rags used to play golf on flat roof at the school. That was kind of what was accepted. Then we discovered later that the janitor at the time was not so much encouraging the locals to come and specialise us, because then she'd get overtime, but wasn't doing anything about it. And also it was funny that she managed to go to Canada on holiday after 3 of our computers were stolen. You'll get your glasses when that was the kind of thing.
No.
So when we started sorting that out, and then one of the times we made a playroom for the infants, and we'd all worked at it. Other teachers would take the kids away. So like other teachers all been knuckled up. They'd done all sorts of things. They'd really, really worked at this, and it was fantastic. And it was going to start on the Monday, and over the weekend it was vandalised.
They get into the school.
And they destroyed it. They targeted that room to the point that they had dark pockets on the far wall, and somebody had actually put glass inside the dark pocket. So that when they put the fan in, it was good.
Right.
That, I would say, was a catalyst when the staff really came together, because they were seriously.
And this was in the old school.
This was in the old school. Because we were at the old school for a year, and we had some staff left and some other ones with it. And when that happened, there were actually some staff in tears. So I had got the call on the Sunday evening, and the janitor had called me, and I called the cleaners, and I called the staff, and I literally phoned every member of staff. And at 8 o'clock the following morning, everyone was there. They were in wheelies, they had proper gardening gloves, everyone was there. And those children went into nap day room on the afternoon, on the Monday afternoon. And
so you got to read it?
It was gutted and redone. Now it was done in a matter of hours, because everybody was angry. And at that point, that was the realisation that there was an internal person working the outside panels. And yes, that problem was resolved as well.
I can imagine.
So we got a lovely new janitor.
Right.
And after that, things, we didn't have so much vandalism, but, then the new school was being built, and we watched all that. And so that was the turning point.
So you had a moment where you actually, an external catalyst brought you all together. The previous school, you manufactured the external thing where you could go off and you could sing, and you would also help for all the other schools. So you've always managed to, I would imagine that if that hadn't happened, you would have done something similar.
Manipulation, yes.
You said that, and we said that when we were talking about doing this, you said that, and I said my shtick is servant leadership. And I find that the idea is that you unlock the inherent greatness in the people that you're working for you. And you went, I tell them to, absolutely, right, bullshit, put them forward. But in reality, I think you are in the service of the children, you're in the service of the community, and you're in the service of. So you're unlocking, you are finding the thing, you found the strengths of the teachers and brought them together. You found the thing that would allow them to gel, whether it's the quiet. You unlocked it. You found a key.
Yeah, and you could see it that way, but there had to be the strengths there to unlock.
Absolutely.
I mean, the biggest one that I found, not the biggest one, but one of the most, that turned out to be one of the not a major one, but one that had quite a significant effect was the dining room staff. Because they were dining room staff. Some people, they have a dinner late. That's magic. Couldn't tell. So, some of the staff didn't know their names of the dinner ladies. Because they wouldn't have it, that's what they were never in. And we got up the dinner ladies one side, and it ended up that if we had anything, they would make, the cakes in the shape of gingerbread men. They would do the Halloween stuff. They were doing all of this because I made sure that everybody else knew who they were. And if they had any problems, we sorted it out. And any child dared to be cheeky to any of the dinner ladies, which they'd got all the murder for before. No way. They were in servitude. They had to go and work for them. They had to. No, not quite. They were really on that side. But they had to clean the tables. They had to do something to make amends. And the cleaning staff as well. I said to the cleaning staff, I said, right, if you've got any problems in any of these rooms, I need to know. And I said, because they need to know. And it wouldn't be the first time that the cleaning staff would get a letter of apology from a child because they'd been such a mess of whatever it was, you know. And that, the little thing like that made a big difference because then you could see the teams every adult member, and that's everyone. And it wasn't just the teachers, you know, and that disappeared. And some of the cleaning ladies or the dinner ladies, you know, if they were having concerts, after I could make such and such for you, or I could do, and then that Julie became involved because concerts were a big thing. And I've never taken
Make a pile of money when you have them, you know.
I spent it just as fast. You know, it was good. It really was good. And that was the janitor was a godsend because he had an artistic talent that nobody knew before that. I mean, he made the footprints to show the kids how to get from the car park to whatever. He made wooden feet dipped in a white paint. He drew a map of the world on the out. He painted a map of the world on the outside wall. Talk to the kids in the intervals and playtimes and say, well, there's such and such. He would do that. He made him a stage. The kids liked acting. So he made him an outside stage. He did so much. And he was good for ideas.
So
absolutely. He was fantastic. So, the teachers were great. I mean, we had the librarian at St. Mary the Forge and,
the old-fashioned Ofsted.
Oh, yeah. It was a really good tea.
So,
really was an excellent.
How long were you in that school for?
12 years.
12 years. And you retired from that?
I retired.
Right. So by the point you retired, you were getting old and grizzled. Right.
I was not.
Well,
I retired then.
You retired then. So, did you have the opportunity to mentor, to coach, to help other people about potential new head teachers? Or, I know you had lots of teachers, like, trainees. Students, yeah. So, did you see staff that went off to other places and took on leadership roles? Yeah. I think so. You worked. The people came to work for you, learned how to do it well, then went on and.
We actually had because it was not a unique experience, but because it was a completely open plan. There was no walls at all. The classroom spaces was a U-shaped ground design hall. And I would stand at one top corner and my deputy would stand at the other top corner. And we started as a school together. We sang a song together. We prayed together. We finished together. So every school day started and finished together as a school, the whole thing together. And because with no walls at all, I mean, the highest division was, like KVI and everybody could see everybody. And it was brilliant when teachers came in and said, this is so-and-so's picking on Mary and Jimmy. And I would say, yes, and I'll tell you why. Or they saying, Mary and Jimmy. And I said, no, they're not, because I'm there as well, and I know they're not. So it was really good for discipline in that ways.
It's not loud.
Yes, at times it was loud. And we tried all sorts of things to quieten it down. 4 bells. Yeah, 4 bells, and every single child had to stand and put their hand in the air. And nobody could move until I came round or somebody came round and said, right, sit, quieten it down. And that was it. The whole school was quietened down. So it
was David Douglas.
Yeah. Wet intervals were fun. So we ended up doing whole school gymnastics or after wet intervals. Some of the energy out from us. But because we became well known for it. We actually became well known also for a reporting system. Shall I go?
Go on.
Then it became known as Lady Wells Automated Reporting System. And I have a son who was quite good at that sort of thing. And he devised it with a little bit of input, and he devised an automated reporting system. And we did in service for other schools, and it ended up that I think you got £200.
Something like that.
And you didn't to pay for that. And all the schools in South Lanarkshire were doing it. Doing that. So we got a name for ourselves. And the students that came knew what they were coming to. And I don't think they were handpicked, but they knew what they were coming to. And it got to the point where the lecturers actually asked if I would go and speak to other people about it. One of them was in Slovenia, and I said, oh, yeah, I did that, and that was it. So, yes, it was a unique experience because it was a unique building. And it was cramped. There wasn't a lot of space, but
You know what you do is make do with what you've got.
yeah, meant to make do stuff. But it was very much a team. And the games came on board too. They really, it was a team. They got well, but it was a team.
You started with fire warnings and frisking people in the late 1970s. Okay. And they would fast forward and go through all these different stages where you learn how to do your job. You learn how to do everyone's job. You learn how to build a team. You learn how to co-op to the community. You learn how to, deal with the difficult situations and all manner of challenges, and some tragedies, some success, many successes. What's the thread? What's the thing?
I think it's togetherness, and I really think it is. You can't do it on your own. Much of the time, because a lot of the times I said, just let me do it. But no, you can't do it on your own. You need to know where your baseline is. You need to know where you're going, and you need other folk to get you there.
There's a lovely analogy of curling, where you've got the stones and you push the stones along the ice. You've got to know where it is. And it's the idea, it's the only sport that Scotland is good at in the Winter Olympics. Right? It's curling. And I often liken the leadership role to the wee man with the brush. Because what you've got the thing that needs to get to where it's going. And you've got the edges that you set. So this far and no further. And your job is not necessarily to do it, but it's to sweep all the rubbish out of the way and make sure that halfway is as clean as possible and let them go. Americans would call it quarterback. So you have the blockers running ahead of you and quarterbacks carrying the ball. So these people are moving the stuff out of the way so that the fellow with the ball can get to where he's going. I think they would call it that. I'm not totally got the football. And I think that's just that thread of togetherness, that thread of understanding where you're going. And it's not a goal. It's a journey.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because if there's nowhere to get to.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like this. It's the idea of systems versus goals. Because you create a goal, you're immediately a loser. I'm going to lose 20 pounds of weight. Well, you're a failure because you haven't lost 20 pounds of weight. You turn it and you say, I'm going to live healthily and exercise every day. And immediately you're a winner. And then the result of that is going to be that you're going to get where you're going. And further. So that big togetherness is the right thing. Is there, if there was one thing, 10,000 billboards and you could write one message on it, what would it be? You
can. If you think you can.
No.
And that's it. We actually got them put up pencils.
Really?
And the kids got pencils.
You can. You
can if you think you can.
Done.
And the weakest child can understand that. The youngest one can understand that. And, well, I can't do that. Well, you can. You can, you really can. To say, I can do it. I can't do it. Yeah, you can. You can do it. And it's self-belief.
Oh, shit.
And it's that self-belief.
Right. And the two kids, I didn't know what yet. They say, I can't do that. And look at them and they say, yeah. And it's this, okay. It's just dad's lecturing, I can't do that yet. Yeah, can't you think you can't? Nothing. Well, ordinarily I would say when we recommend what you're doing, where to find you, and they can't be found. They're not to be recommended. And as a life well lived, I think, what didn't we work out once you'd impacted sub with 3,500 children? It's like to make 3,500 as a life full of meaning and purpose. I think you can't do much different than that.
I still enjoy my job. I still enjoy my job.
What's the best bit?
Retiring. I had always intended to do, I wanted to be in head before I was 40, and I wanted to retire at 55. And circumstances didn't make me think I got 56, so that's fine. And I booked the debt challenging full. Don't realise it at all. I've thoroughly enjoyed my job right up to the end. I've enjoyed it, and I wanted to leave when I was enjoying it and when I had nice memories. And funnily enough, the staff that I still meet up with, unusual ones not the promoted sort of staff type thing, but the staff that I still meet up with, and they are very nice.
Good.
And they always, that's they are the parents. They enable things I don't, which is not so good, but that's the way. Yeah.
Good man.
I really get.
How to live a life with no regrets.
Yeah.
Andrea Morton, my mother, thank you very much indeed.
You're doing it,